we think that this is a very important event because Ukraine needs a lot of finance. Ukraine needs a lot of investments, and these times are unprecedented. And we need to have innovative investment mechanisms in order to support Ukraine right away. We cannot wait till the end of full-scale invasion, till our victory. We need to support businesses right away. And today we talk about business in general and with some specific focused on SMEs. So I would like to share my presentation with some analytics, some ideas, and some information about what we do and how this could benefit developments and investments into SME sector specifically. To start with, I would like to talk a bit about macroeconomic situation in Ukraine. So we see that exchange rate is quite stable since August 2022. So it's almost a year when Ukraine, with support of international partners, remains active in this area. And we try to stabilize the economy, and you can see results on your screen. So the rate of US dollar is quite flat. For almost a year now. Euro rate is also within the boundaries of acceptable changes. And we can see that the level of international reserves is increasing all the time. So now it's about 36 billion US dollars. That is the biggest figure for the last couple of years. And that gives us insurance that the exchange rate will remain more stable, and activities of companies that are focused not on export markets, but on local markets as well, they will be more predictable. GDP growth, you know that in 2022, we had a sharp decline, about 30% decline in GDP. In first quarter of 2023, again, decline 10.5%, but according to forecast of the National Bank and the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, we will have growth of 15.9% in second quarter, 3.9% in third, and 3.7% in the fourth quarter of this year. Support that I mentioned, since February 2022, Ukraine has received unprecedented external financial support, totaling 51.9 billion US dollars. This financial aid for Ukraine has come from 22 countries and also institutions like World Bank, European Investment Bank, International Monetary Fund, as well as European Union. So the biggest supporters were the United States of America, $17.9 billion, and European Union, $16 billion. They're the biggest contributors. This year, we expect to receive at least 42 billion US dollars in external support to maintain economy and to keep macroeconomic figures in appropriate shape, let's say that. So what was happening pre-war? Let's look at M&A transactions and market activities. So in 2020, we have seen 1,000 M&A transactions. That was a pandemic year. After pandemic year, Ukraine was increasing M&A activities. So business was investing, business was buying assets. There was a big number of M&A transactions, total amount 2.7 billion US dollars. M&A transactions in manufacturing specifically, $340 million in deals in metallurgy, $234 million in agriculture, $142 million in petrochemical industry, and $58 million in food industry. This is only in manufacturing, as I said. Now, what we have to do to rebuild our industry? According to the World Bank latest assessment, we will need at least $411 billion to rebuild Ukraine. Out of that figure, at least $14 billion will be needed in the next 10 years, only to reconstruct the industrial facilities. So we're talking only about direct damage. Also, about $4 billion will be needed to restore service delivery of businesses in Ukraine. And there are indirect damages that will have to be covered, those figures are way more significant and they will have to be assessed in due course. SMEs in 2021. This is our core focus today, SMEs. So let's see how many people are employed in this sector. When we talk about large enterprises, we have 1.6 million employed in that sector. When we talk about medium and small enterprises, more than 4.6 million people are employed in this sector. So you can see how significant the need is to provide investments right now to support families, to support people, to support economy, because SMEs in Ukraine is the backbone of the economy, as in all other countries. More than 99% of all registered enterprises are SMEs in Ukraine. So we have, when we talk about figures and numbers of enterprises. In Ukraine pre-war, we had 610 large enterprises. At the same time, 17,500 medium enterprises and more than 350,000 of small enterprises. Large enterprises turnover in 2021 was $200 billion. Combined turnover of small and medium enterprises was about 330 billion US dollars. So it's a big part of Ukrainian economy. SMEs needs in financing. This is the latest assessment as of April 2023, conducted by the Advanter Group. They have talked to more than 1,000 respondents from SME sectors, and they were asking companies how much finance they need in order to maintain their operations and to think maybe also about development. So weighted average need in financing per company is over $900,000. About 6% of the SME sector will need between 4% will need between $3 to $10 million in financing, and 2% will need more than $10 million in financing. The rest of the companies will need less, but as I said, the average is about 900,000 per company. The amount is huge. The lack of finance is huge. That's why innovative investments are very important, as I said, already being introduced and thought of right now at this moment. So what kind of finance and investments usually used by SMEs in order to conduct their operations? Usually these are grants and subsidies from Ukraine and from foreign countries, sometimes from European Union specifically, commercial bank loans, private equity investments, reinvestments, IFIs financing, and venture capital. Capital investments by Ukrainian business in 2021, also pre-war year. And we can see that the structure of capital investment in manufacturing, it's quite similar if we compare large and medium enterprises. Large enterprises invested 62% in machines and equipment and 32% in construction of buildings and facilities. Medium-sized businesses invested 65% in machines and equipment and 31% in construction of buildings. Small enterprises invest more in facility itself and less in equipment. So that gives you kind of a flavor what kind of investment activities are needed and what will be needed. Because when we talk about blended finance, when we talk about innovative investments, we can also talk about leasing companies that can bring investments in the form of equipment. So it's not only financial investment that is needed. We need end product in the form of equipment or facilities that can be brought and built for the industry, and that would be a good substitution to financial investments. Reinvestment in manufacturing is one of the biggest sources of receiving capital by the companies. In 2019, reinvestments in manufacturing totaled to $4.4 billion. In 2020, 2.9, almost $3 billion. And then there was increase again in 2021 to $4.1 billion. Turnover of manufacturing in Ukraine was also significant. Food products, more than 1.1 billion, basic materials. It's not the turnover, it's the reinvestment. So 1.1 in food products billion dollars, basic metals almost $1 billion, and then wood and paper $436 million, and rubber and plastics and other sectors also outlined in the presentation that will be shared with you. FDIs, inflows in manufacturing specifically. We have seen actually in 2020 probably the biggest equity inflow in new capital in manufacturing in Ukraine. It was $251 million. And in 2021, it was $167 million. That shows us that a lot of capital comes from reinvestment. And at the same time, not much of new capital is entering Ukraine. So that should be and is the priority for Ukrainian government, bringing of new capital, new investments to Ukraine in order to match and even do more than reinvestments. That will show that private capital feel safer in Ukraine, that there are financial instruments that allow proper investments in Ukraine. When we look at types of economic activity, so $57.4 million were in food products, 35 in wood and paper, and chemicals, 19.8. So these are the three top sectors for new capital investment. Loans from Ukrainian commercial banks. In 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2023, we have seen that there was actually decline, apart from 2021, because in 2021, during pandemic year, Ukraine was providing program 579, and 2020 as well, that allowed unlocking of bank capital to companies in Ukraine. At the moment, the total loans to manufacturing industry, only manufacturing industry, is $3 billion. Almost half of it goes to production of food products in Ukraine, then $367 million to metallurgy, rubber and plastic, again, $336 million. We as UkraineInvest initiated a program, and we are very thankful to UNDP. We are very thankful to all our governmental partners, the Ministry of Economy, to the Prime Minister of Ukraine, to all that support this activity. So we have signed a memorandum with UNDP to conduct a joint research that will suggest instruments for innovative investments that are needed for economic transformation of Ukraine. And this study will focus specifically on SME sector as stage one. So we would like to present to you the content of this study, what this study will be focused on. So first of all, there will be a macroeconomic overview of Ukraine, SMEs landscape in industrial sectors, role of SMEs in the rebuilding of Ukraine, and economic transformation. Then there will be also an overview of the international funding that may be applied for projects in Ukraine, namely for growth capital for SMEs distributed through impact investment vehicles. There are a big number of international players that can become donors for such activity. We are not only talking about kind of usual suspects like development finance institutions or European banks. We are talking about big corporations. We are talking about big family offices, investment funds that have policies to distribute some amount of their investment portfolio for impact investments. And we are hopeful that with the support of the UNDP and coordination within government of Ukraine, we will be able to reach out to that wide audience and bring capital that has not been mobilized for Ukraine yet. And we're talking about billions of US dollars that then can be matched or over even matched by private capital, because usually $2 or $3 of donor capital can be matched with $7 or $8 of private capital. International overview of impact investment practices will be included. Overview of the recent international efforts to provide war and political risk cover for projects in Ukraine. Ministry of Economy of Ukraine doing a great job here by communicating with key players throughout the world, like MIGA, like DFC, like G7 ECAs, in order to unlock this investment insurance potential, because that will also bring more investments to Ukraine. Blended finance mechanisms that can be used for revitalization of Ukrainian SMEs in manufacturing sector, international experience and best practices. This is the point that I mentioned already. So we need to blend state money, donor money, and private capital. By doing so, we will bring way more investments in Ukraine, and we are talking about, as I said, billions only for SMEs sector. Then we will also assess readiness of Ukrainian SMEs for cooperation with private equity funds and DFIs, and we will do illustrative pipeline of projects. It's not enough to bring investment mechanism to Ukraine. We need to make sure that Ukrainian SMEs are ready to cooperate at best international standard. We need to have transparent business administration. We need to have audit accounts of companies. If we're not talking about big fours, maybe some shorter versions or other companies can be used for that, but we need to make sure that SMEs in Ukraine operate at international level in a transparent way, and that they're ready to produce proper business plans, feasibility studies, in order to explain how investments will be administrated and what kind of outcomes can be expected by the investors. Government, UNDP, and other international organizations' role in the creation and facilitation of impact investment in Ukraine is important, so we will be providing suggestions. Also, this activity should be coordinated between Ukraine, G7, in order to facilitate impact investment for SMEs. And SMEs, not only for SMEs that operate in Ukraine, but also for SMEs from throughout the world that are interested to enter Ukraine. And by doing so, we will unlock that new capital investment that I mentioned in my previous slide, because we will switch from reinvestment to bring in new capital to Ukraine. Also, we will do mapping of key stakeholders that may contribute to the development of impact investments, because we need to bring them together, we need to suggest mechanisms, and we need to get them to the action. And suggested course of actions for Ukraine, G7, EU, DFIs, IFOs, investors, and SMEs that implement or planning to invest in Ukraine. Why? Because we have a lot of support, a lot of interest, but coordination, I think, is still at the beginning. And the more coordination we will have, the more finance we will unlock to Ukraine. Now I have two more slides about SME project examples. So what kind of projects are we talking about that needs investment? I think it's very interesting for potential investors, because SME sector in Ukraine, as I said, very strong. We have many companies that have significant track record of doing business in Ukraine, and they are very attractive investment targets. They are not startups. They are companies that can effectively use investment and finance in order to make profits for the company and for the investor. For example, project on restoration of the Ukrainian tomato industry through introduction of industrial production of high-quality tomato paste and supply of high-quality raw materials to food industry enterprises in Ukraine and also throughout the world. So the company is looking for financing, not investment at this stage, in amount of $26 million. They can repay the loan within 3 years, and they would implement this finance, they would use this finance within a year, which is very effective, and they can, this would be a fixed income exercise with some very predictable outcomes, because it's a very good and strong company. Another project, a company operated from 2017, They are planning to build 16,000 square meters greenhouse complex for the all-year hydroponic cultivation of salad greens and flavoring herbs using MGS technology. So the company is looking for $8 million investment. In this case, could be private equity. And they already invested own money in amount of $2.2 million. Payback period 6 years, and project will be implemented to start operation within 1 year from receiving the investment. So we will be working on the pipeline, as I said. There will be tens, hundreds of similar projects, not only from Ukraine, but also from foreign SMEs that are interested in doing business in Ukraine. UkraineInvest is the government of Ukraine investment promotion office, and we're happy to talk to Ukrainian SMEs or foreign SMEs that want to do business in Ukraine. Talk to them about their pipeline and include them in our list of projects that can be targets for the investment fund, impact investment fund, or a number of investment funds that can be created as a result of this exercise, when we will identify donor capital and we will invite private capital to form these innovative financial and investment mechanisms.